In this video, I was going to show you my strategy for the Lu Bu boss fight. This is one of the hardest boss fights, if not the hardest boss fight in Hulaoguan Fallen Dynasty. I know a lot of people are struggling with this one, so I wanted to give you guys some tips, things that I have found that work really well for this build. Okay, so let's start off at the beginning where he is mounted in combat when you go in. Usually he shoots a shot at you, and the best thing you can do here is just dodge or quickly deflect. And then he's going usually to charge at you with one of two red attacks. One that's like really fast, a straight charge at you, and one where he jumps up into the air and then sort of like makes a triangle down to you. So he'll go like kind of up at an angle and then down at an angle onto you really quickly. The first one, the direct charge, is much faster, and the second one is slower, but it's deceptive because the part where he like elevates into the air is slower, part where he comes down is faster. So you need to get these down and time these quickly. His actions on horseback are probably much easier than what he does when he's on foot. So getting this part down is just going to make the fight easier. And he usually does these two things over and over besides like random melee attacks and bow shots during his horseback phases. So they aren't different. So he does this later on in the fight. He does this at the beginning of the fight. So just get used to deflecting these red attacks and you'll get him off horseback real quick. Now, obviously fighting him on foot is the challenge part of this fight. And one of the things that makes it a little bit more difficult is the fact that the horse continuously charges around the circle around the arena. So if you don't stay kind of in the center-ish area, you risk being hit by that horse. So try and keep your positioning to the middle of the arena. If you find you're getting off too far to one side, kind of sprint back to the middle and reposition yourself so you don't also have to worry too much about that horse during the fight. Now, there are a few attacks to look out for. Let's talk about the critical attacks first. One where he sort of slams his spear down, fire on the ground, and then jumps into the air. You're going to want to make sure that you wait for the last possible second to deflect this. It takes a second longer than you think it should. He kind of comes down pretty slowly. So make sure you don't press deflect too early with this, and make sure you let him connect with you before hitting that deflect button. Otherwise, you're going to do it too early and you're going to get struck by this attack. Another critical attack he does is where he sort of puts his spear into the ground and leaves a fire trail as he charges at you. And again, this is another one where you have a tendency to deflect too early. Make sure you wait for him to be right up on top of you when you do this and before you deflect. And another thing is, if you see him do this when you're really close to you, it can be nearly impossible to deflect this unless you have perfect timing. So what I suggest doing, if he does this while you're like point blank, is just dodging quickly to the right. Getting out of the way from him, because obviously his spear is going to be on the opposite side of you if you dodge to the right, and he'll usually just fly right by you and miss. So if you see him doing this when you're point blank, just dodge out of the way. But if you see him, a good distance away, make sure you get in there for that deflect so you can get that, spirit depletion on him. And the last critical attack he does is one where he sort of like spins real quick, and then he'll do like a follow-up thrust. If you get hit by that first attack, it's really hard to recover in time for the second attack, but you can do it. So make sure even if you do get struck, you're still trying to deflect that second attack. And sometimes he does this when you're right on top of him, and it's hard to get a read whether he's going to do the charge or a spin, and you have like a split second to decide. So this can be a very hard one to read, and most of the time I just recommend trying to dodge out of the way of this one if you see it coming, much like you would dodge out of the way of the charge attack if it's point blank. That way you at least don't get hit, and it's a better trade-off than just taking a ton of damage from this attack. Beyond these attacks, the challenging part is reading and deflecting his combos. He has very different combos, different timings, and learning all these takes a few tries, to say the least. And really you need to focus when you're fighting him on foot on deflecting these attacks. Don't be overly aggressive. Just simply read these attacks, deflect them, get in a hit or two. And if you have any sort of ranged spells, when he like jumps away to shoot at you with his bow, you can throw ranged attacks at him, deflect, throw more ranged attacks at him. Make sure you're getting chip damage on him. Fire spells work badly for this build. I don't recommend using fire, even though I'm using them in this video. He seems to resist fire pretty significantly. I would suggest something like poison, putting a damage over time on him if you can. But you basically want to get any range damage you can on him from afar where it's safe to deal damage and you don't have to worry about some crazy combo. Another challenging part for this fight is trying to heal, get separation, heal. So make sure you take the opportunity to heal when you can. Even if you're at like half health, even though it's maybe not the best use of a health pot when you're at half health, sometimes that'll keep you alive because you might not have an opening to heal again before he does like 2 or 3 combos, and maybe they only deal half your health bar, but you only have half your health bar because you haven't healed. So try and keep your health above 3/4 health if you can. This is another tip. And 2 final tips I can give you is, first, make sure your morale is at 25 when you go into this fight. This is going to make things easier. Take the time to farm enemies outside if you're not at 25 morale. Make sure you get the flags, etc. And this might take you 5 minutes to 10 minutes depending on how much morale you need to farm. But that's going to be faster. This fight will go easier. It'll go faster than spending it in there dying for another 5 to 10 minutes. It'll give you a much better chance of doing this fight because it'll make him easier to defeat. So make sure that you go get your morale to 25. And finally, make sure you have at least 6 Dragon Pot uses for this fight. There are at least that many at this point in the game. If you don't have at least that many, I would recommend going back to previous missions and finding the items that increases your Dragon Pot uses in those missions in order to have at least 6, because if you only have like 4 or 5 for this fight, it's going to be rough.